Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's LinkedIn Live session. I am Shipra Malhotra, Executive Editor, DynamicCIO, and I have with me my co-host and moderator, Bablu Kumar. You all must be thinking there are a lot of, discussions around a lot of, you know, panels and fireside chats around women in IT. So what's so different or what's new about this session, or why do we really need to keep talking about it? Now, so before I actually introduce our guests, I want to get into why, we decided to initiate the Women in IT series, which will be a regular LinkedIn Live series, which we plan to do once every month. Now, coming back to why the series, if you look at the number of women employed in the IT industry in India, it has seen a rapid increase over the past 10 years, with more than 30% of employees now being female. Now, this contrasts with stagnation or decline in the participation of women in IT in many Western countries, and women's participation in IT is also higher in comparison to other sectors in India. Now, one of the reasons for that is that around 2006, the booming Indian IT industry was faced with a talent shortage, and it launched initiatives to attract more women in the workforce. It was a relatively new industry and was relatively unencumbered by the traditional thought processes. So operating in a highly competitive environment, talent acquisition and retention is important, making gender diversity a business imperative. And we are also a country that's almost at 50-50 gender parity rate in STEM graduates. So all this is good. So where is the challenge? The challenge is in retaining this diversity through into the middle management and leadership roles. It is hardly news that women are chronically and widely underrepresented in the leadership roles in the technology industry. And there are various reasons for that. So we will get into that later in our discussion today. Now, according to IDC, the percentage of women in senior leadership positions grew from 21% to 24% between 2018 and 2019. Now, although these statistics are trending upward, women still feel less enthusiastic about their senior leadership prospects than men. The report found that 54% of men said that they felt it was likely that they would be promoted to executive management in their company. Meanwhile, only 25% of women said the same, noting a lack of support, self-confidence, and mentorship, as well as feeling the need to prove themselves more than men to get promoted. Now, the representation of more women in leadership positions is absolutely critical, because having women in senior leadership positions can positively impact female employee engagement and retention. And in organizations where 50% or more senior leadership positions are held by women, they are more likely to offer equal pay, and female employees are more likely to stay with the company longer than a year, report higher job satisfaction, and feel the company is trustworthy. Now, the big question in front of us is, how can we replicate the success at the entry level through to the management layers? How do we maintain that gender parity momentum at the management layer as well? Now, this warrants a genuine dialogue around some of the most pertinent questions and issues on top of mind of women in the tech industry who are aspiring to move up the ladder into the leadership roles. So engaging in this very critical dialogue and finding answers to the most pertinent questions is what we seek to do through our new LinkedIn Live series, Breaking the Barriers, Women in Tech. And throughout this series, we will be hosting women achievers from the technology industry every month to share their journey, both struggles and successes, as well as inspire and mentor the next generation of women leaders on some very crucial aspects like boardroom representation, networking, reskilling and upskilling, presenting to the top management, self-development, among others. And what better way to start the series than with two very accomplished technology leaders? I have the pleasure and honor of welcoming Amrita Gangotra, Managing Director, Ityuk Digital Solutions, and Shivangi Nadkarni, co-founder and CEO Arka. So while traversing distinct paths, both have made a mark as thought leaders in their respective domains of IT and security, while successfully embarking on their entrepreneurial journeys. So more about my speakers today. So besides being the MD of Ityuk Digital Solutions, Amrita is also an independent board director for many companies. She has extensive experience working in the telecom, IT services, and FMCG sectors across India, UK, and Europe. Amrita has played a key role in many business impacting transformation initiatives, including revenue share IT outsourcing deal with IBM, launch of new m-commerce products, creating the IT platform for global enterprise business at Vodafone, introducing the tools and organization to support the digital telco strategy of Vodafone, 4G network rollout, and preparing for 5G introduction. She has held group CIO and CTIO positions at two of the leading telcos, Bharti Airtel and Vodafone. She has also been a member of the executive management team at Bharti Airtel and Vodafone Hungary. Amrita also has experience of mentoring startups, innovation funds, and serving as a member of several customer advisory boards. So welcome, Amrita. Uh, our next speaker, Shivangi Nadkarni, is the co-founder and CEO of Arka, a company that specializes in the cybersecurity and data privacy domains. She is passionate about empowering organizations to address the risks associated with information. Shivangi brings extensive experience in the security domain, wherein she has worked with leading organizations such as SIFI and Wipro before she embarked onto the entrepreneurial journey with Arka. She conducts and serves as a faculty on advanced data privacy and GDPR training programs, and she's passionate about helping organizations implement their InfoSec and data privacy programs. She has also co-authored a textbook on data privacy for the Data Security Council of India, a NASSCOM body, for their DCPP certification program. So welcome both Amrita and Shivangi. Thank you so much for taking out time to join us today for this inaugural session of Women in Tech. And before we get started, I'd like to mention that this is an interactive session, so do make the most of this opportunity and send in your questions for Amrita and Shivangi on any aspect related to this topic, whether it is career, leadership, networking, skilling, or anything else that comes to your mind. We will be taking up these questions live towards the end during the Q&A session. So let me get started. I want to start off the session by asking both of you, so maybe Amrita ma'am, you can go first on this, about your journey, what has gone into the making of the successful leader that you are today, especially, taking the entrepreneurial route after all these years that you have served in leadership roles in organizations. And please don't hesitate to talk about your successes as well as failures that have gone into shaping who you are today.
Thank you, Shipra, for inviting me for this inaugural session on women in technologies. And I think it's a very relevant subject to be talking about. And I'm sure, especially the younger women, etc., would want to know what really goes in to make a career in technology. And being a woman, what are the challenges and how do we go about it? As far as my story goes, I was a good student and I was always passionate in terms of knowing very clearly that I wanted a career for myself, be financially independent. But I do understand, and I did understand at that time, that it's very difficult to balance home life and a very strong career. But I was fortunate enough to get a surrounding, be it my husband or be it my family members, my mother, who was supporting on the home front. But having said that, having some clarity of thought in terms of how your career is going and where it's going is important, but also taking the risk and getting out of your comfort zone is very important. So if you look at my career, and I've actually commented on the LinkedIn, and I got a lot of comments around that every 8 to 10 years I have sort of switched my careers or moved. I have sort of stayed and proven myself in one particular company or area of domain, and then I have worked first in FMCG in Nestle for about 9 years, and then in ITES with HCL Comnet, and then I spent 10 years with Bharti and about 7 years with Voda. So there have been longish careers, but at a time when I was given an opportunity, I took it. So when Bharti happened, at that time, telco was not a known, space for me. It was like being thrown into the deep end of a swimming pool. But I took it. Similarly, when the international opportunity came, although they were coming when my daughter was growing up, but when it came when she was in the UK, I took it. So that's important, first and foremost, that you're able to plan out your career. Having said that, moving from corporate to entrepreneur is another ball game and another challenge. Even understanding how you set up your company and how do you sing again. Having the network of people who can help you, I found that was of immense value to me, both in terms of setting up the company, knowing where to go, what vision to create, mentoring, all of that I took advantage of, and the whole ecosystem of networks of people that I knew in terms of creating the business cases and business opportunities for myself. As far as the other thing that I'm really proud of is the fact that I have a daughter who's a master's in engineer and then a PhD in nanotechnology, and then going on to do a postdoctorate in Georgetown. So she's grown up to have her own values, principles, etc. So balancing that out while having such a stressful career, not stressful, it was very, very, motivating, and I enjoyed it. So I'm proud of that. As far as failures are concerned, as I told you, I was a very good student when I was studying. And I attempted to do my PhD while I was working from IIT. I actually spent 5-6 years. And then when I got posted out, I didn't have the tenacity to continue, mainly because of the admin issues. It was just too much for me, just because of a small thing. I published papers, I did everything, and my guide was really disappointed with me to say, the last bit of 100 meters you haven't completed, and after doing all the heavy lifting. So that's what I would say is my story.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us, Mita ma'am. Shivangi, again, you started from the corporate side and you moved to entrepreneurial side. What has your journey been like, and any key learnings, from the successes as well as failures that you have encountered through the journey?
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for inviting me here. And I don't know if I technically qualify for the success tag, but anyway, it's a big ego boost that you do things. So my journey has been, I had a very traditional Premier Institute sort of background, in engineering degree from BITS, and then I went to IMC. And when I graduated from IMC, I wanted to follow a traditional FMCG marketing path. But, life took me in the direction where I ended up working for a startup back when the word was not even coined or known. And I joined SIFI as I was the 5th employee of SIFI. And, it was a very different experience because I got to see the birth of an industry there. We were the first private ISP. There are lots of things that we saw happen at SIFI. And I think I was there with the company for 10 years, and it gave me a direction and molded me in a way which was very different from a traditional corporate path. in the sense, because we were doing stuff which had no precedent. We in a way were, groomed by Safi to think in directions which were non-traditional, because there were no solutions or set directions available. So in one way it was very liberating, but at the same time also huge responsibilities, and it also significantly enhanced risk-taking abilities, right? But within the comfort of a corporate. I went from there. I got many opportunities at Wipro, at SIFI, including getting to set up the first certifying authority in India. When I was given that project, I basically didn't even know what it meant, and then from there it took me along a path which I hadn't anticipated, and that's where I kind of stumbled into the whole security domain per se, And then after SIFI, I moved to Wipro. I was running a global practice. Again, huge learning, fantastic organization. But what I realized in the short time I spent at Wipro is that I am not cut out for working in a large corporate. I think Safi spoiled me for life. And that's when I sort of realized that, if I have to go back and be entrepreneurial now, whether I should do it on my own, whether I shouldn't, were questions. But, one fine day, I literally upped and quit with no plan in mind, shifted cities, moved to Pune. I joined up with some folks, started a venture, went down the drain, started another venture, which again went down the drain. And finally, after 4 years, I met my current co-founder, Samir, and he just quit KPMG, and we said, hey, let's align forces. We're in the same domain, trying to do pretty much the same thing. And then we started with no clear plan in mind, except to say we didn't want to do the traditional services business, and we wanted to be in the infosec and related space, and with that started how we grew, and then we stumbled into the area of privacy, and then things have been after that been quite good. Got our idea of building a platform, and so here we are. I still think we're just starting, but yeah, I mean, when I look back, I realize it's been 8 years, and you folks have been witness to, I think, a lot of that journey of mine. So I really have to thank DynamicCIO for that.
So nice of you. Very nice, inspirational story. So my first question is for Amrita. According to you, why is there a dearth of women in the middle management and leadership roles in the technology industry? What do you think are some of the biggest hurdles that stop and discourage more and more women coming and getting into the leadership positions, and how they can overcome these barriers?
In my opinion, I think it's not only in technology, but there is a huge fallout at the middle management level and upwards as far as having a full-fledged career. Mainly because in India, it's the socio-cultural setup that is there, where it is very difficult to manage both home and, the office and the career environment. So that's one of the fundamental reasons. But I would say, just putting the blame on the social aspect of it is also not correct. A lot of times we have grown up and we have been, tuned in such a manner that we put forward everybody else's requests, needs before we think about ourselves. While that's not wrong and those values are very good, but there needs to be an element of thinking about self and finding a way to, pursue your dreams and passion. And at times it's not because, one is the aspect of the challenges, but it's also the drive that you need to have to continue what you were doing well, and that's one aspect. And second aspect, I would say that, and it's changing very fast, there wasn't an opportunity for women to come back after a break that they take, let's say for maternity leave, or because they need to take a backseat in their husband's career, etc. But more and more MNCs and larger companies are having these programs called return to work. and they're supporting women who are interested to come back to work. In that, there are two aspects. While the companies will support you, because in technology, you become very outdated very fast. So keeping up to date with what's happening, how the technology is evolving, and what is relevant in the current space, and after the break that you have taken is going to be very important. So in my opinion, while there is a socioeconomic or the cultural aspect that is a large part of the reason why people are women are dropping out, but there's also the self awareness, self motivation to pursue that and get a company that supports you.
Thank you, ma'am. Along these lines, I have a slightly different variant of this question for Shivangi, for security enthusiasts. We see even lesser women in the mid-management and leadership positions in the InfoSec domain within the IT industry. What do you think is the reason for that, and how this can be tackled?
I think the reasons are pretty similar to what Amrita talked about. So there is definitely the socioeconomic aspect, but keeping that aside for a moment and accepting that that's a reality. Beyond that, I mean, the ones who manage to transcend that, there are certain perception issues, right? So I feel when I talk to young people, the perception is that security is one of those things where you're sitting and doing ethical hacking. So it's equated with that to begin with, and it is assumed that it is something where you sit night and day and work on it, lots of bad guys and stuff like that, right? So there is first of all, the what really it means, what the whole domain means itself, is there's a lot of I would say misinformation out there. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know, and this is just anecdotal, so one doesn't know what studies have been done. But the ones who actually come through that and join the field, I think the reasons are pretty much similar to what the overall industry and the tech industry faces. I would say, compared to many industries, this is a fairly egalitarian industry in terms of giving opportunities. But one has to also grab those opportunities, right? I find oftentimes that women more than men, so it happens with both genders, they tend to be a lot less confident. Tend to suffer at times from what is known as the imposter syndrome, right? Tend to not believe that they are good enough at what they're doing, and one fine day this is all going to sort of open up, not realizing that they're doing a great job. So I think one is that. So there's, and second, as Amrita mentioned, not enough opportunities of active mentorship, seeking out mentorship or help, because of that same, that sense of less confidence leads to many of this, right? So not having mentors, not stepping out and networking. There's networking has a sort of a negative connotation associated with it. It's equated to going out and drinking after office hours, when it is not that, right? So many of those things, so you don't build that larger network that you require to give you the step up when you need it, right? So we're all human beings. We need help. We need support. We need mentorship. We need coaching. We're not finished products where we know what is to be done at every stage, right? So it's important that you have access to that. Not everybody works in organizations where it is offered in a structured manner. So it's important that they find what they need to do. I also feel one more thing, which is a very individualistic thing to people, which is that it's very important you find the niche of doing what you enjoy doing. Many people tend to box themselves into certain profiles, and they believe that, okay, this is my background, so this is what I should be doing now, and this is what I should be doing in 3 years, and this is the designation I should have, this is the salary I should have. So what happens in the process is you box yourself into boundaries, and in the process you miss out opportunities, because the world is so full of opportunities that if you don't have that free flowing attitude to adapt and move with what comes your way, then also you end up missing opportunities for growth, right? So I'm thinking these could be some of the reasons why specific to security. And of course, the fact that you need to keep on skilling. And that's something which we'll talk about also.
Right. Very, very rightly put by both of you. And, when you're talking about, mentorship opportunities and, talking about some very important and key aspects, when it comes to moving up the ladder and, comes to building leadership and managerial qualities. That is the kind of mentorship that we are also aiming to achieve through this series. So here on, I will now touch upon some key aspects, that you both of you have brought up during your conversation, and your suggestions on some of these aspects will be really helpful, in mentoring and inspiring some of the women who are listening to us today. So in that case, an important area that I want to touch upon here is how women are perceived in the boardroom, especially when they put their points across. What are your suggestions for women in the tech industry to work towards getting the seat in the boardroom and get their voice heard and valued? So what will be your suggestion, Amrita? And especially, you have had a lot of experience working in leadership positions in the UK and Europe as well. So any observations in terms of gender diversity and representation at the board level there in comparison to India, and any key learnings from there that you would like to pass on to other women in the technology industry?
What I have found, and this is only a year and a half of experience on being on the boards actually. Otherwise, I have seen the board very closely, being on the other side of the table on leadership management roles, where we had to, face the board as such. While the Indian government has made it a little easier to have an independent women board member in the construct, and the whole idea was to balance out and create the diversity, I think it's still been very, very difficult for women who actually can contribute towards the boards, etc., to break the glass ceiling. And some of them have, and I'm hats off to them. But then they're very, sought after. So they are holding 10, 12 portfolios. The opportunity for others is still very difficult, has been my experience over the last 1.5 years. There are lots of opportunities, and especially in technology. And now the boards have realized that they need to diversify their board members' competency. So earlier it used to be more or less people who have been in marketing, sales, or CEOs and CFOs and audits, or HR type of people who have been on the boards. But today's world, technology plays a significant role in most industries across domains. And the importance of technology and the impact it has on the business and the business model is changing very fast. So that realization is there. So what I have seen is, if they can get a combination of a woman and who has technology, it is something that they would like to consider. But it's still difficult, is what I'm finding, to sort of make inroads over there. Hopefully that will change. It's no different in Europe and UK, and the same challenges remain. In fact, over there, finding women in technology at leadership is more challenging, because for them, as you would know, the STEM figures are also much lower than the numbers in India. And so therefore the inflow, the number of candidates of this type of proficiency is quite low. So the challenges remain the same worldwide, I would say, nothing different. You just need to pursue and continue. There are people who recognize what's happening. They want to make the change. The environment is right and ripe. And I do hope that this transformation will happen a little faster.
So from your experience, being on both sides of the board, are there any specific qualities that you would like to point out or list down that, women should work on building, in terms of making their voice heard in the board, or to be more
See, I mean, if you
visible?
come in only with domain experience, it's not good enough. In today's world, the boards, and it's serious business in India. I mean, you have a lot of liability also if you want to become a board member. So you have to be able to read the financials, the P&L, the various analyst reports, etc. So understanding of that is very important also. So competence wise, just being competent in your own area is not good enough as if you want to be a board member. And today it's become mandatory to register yourself in the board, in the independent directors database, and pass an exam, which is pretty extensive, really. I mean, the number of chapters and the number of domain areas, etc., and the practices that they go through and the case study you have to go through gives you a lot of knowledge about how to conduct yourself on the board. Having said that, you come with an experience when you're in senior management, etc., that you've learned how to present yourself, how to put your voice across. That, I think, is not so much a challenge once you're aware that not only your competency area you need to comment on, but other areas that are important, whether it's the NRC or the audit or the other committees that are there. Be an active and participative member.
Okay. So Shivangi, you also spoke about, earlier that, that women comparatively lack confidence, as compared to men. So, and that actually comes across also when it comes to, presenting to the board, when it comes to being more visible and being heard at the board level. So any specific, guidelines that you have for women in the technology industry who perhaps today are not, perhaps in the middle management or maybe lower down the rung, lower than the middle management, but they aspire to reach that level one day. So how can they start mentoring themselves and preparing themselves to reach that level one day?
Good. So I'm not going to talk about the board level position. I've myself never been on a board except my own company. But I would, but just looking at senior positions. So taking a leaf out of what Amrita said, it is not just important that you know what you do, that domain that you work in well, and that you need to know really well. But in addition to that, you need to start working on building a 360-degree perspective. I have seen many people, I mean, again, across genders, who are very happy in that little cocoon that they are in. They don't want to look at how, for example, sales happens, or how business is coming in, or, the impact on teams. Soft skills are often looked down upon, or may not be looked down upon, but they're kind of trivialized, right? All of that is important as you grow and you start building on, how you deal with people, how you learn to take inputs from everywhere, start building a perspective, because you don't live in in silos, right? You are a part of a larger whole. Your industry is a part of a larger whole, and it's important that you learn to bring those perspectives in. Keep track of what's happening in the world around you, outside world. We are very integrated and overall as a globe today. I find that is one thing that one needs to actively work on, and it's not something which your boss or your team leader is going to come and tell you, go and read The Economist, or go and read this kind of stuff. That is something which you have to cultivate on your own, right? That's one thing. Second is, of course, work on your communication skills, right? So a lot of people often think communication is just about being extremely good when you talk, right? But communication begins with being an active listener. So being able to listen, to be able to put down the clear points, have a clear point of view, articulate it in a very simple and straightforward and crisp manner. If it means learning to first write what you say, but work towards it. And then, of course, having the confidence to stand up and state it with confidence. But I think that comes when you really know your subject, right? So it comes from practice. Have the courage to stand up and speak when you get an opportunity. I remember my own self 20 years ago. I would say I would hesitate to talk. And, I luckily had a boss who was a woman, a mentor to me, who used to reprimand me after a meeting saying that you knew more than everybody else in the meeting and why didn't you speak up, right? So somebody needs to sort of push you. I think if you don't do it yourself, then it's important that you start actively realizing these are gaps and work towards it. And if you work for a large company, there are so many opportunities to work on yourself that that the organization presents. Grab them. Don't sort of, negate them. That's what I would think.
So as we are talking about skills and how important they are, so I have another question for both Amrita and Shivangi, one by one. So how crucial is reskilling and upskilling for women in technology industry as they eye the corner office? What are some of the essential skills they need to develop? Not just technical skills, but also leadership skills that they need to develop for their career progression. For instance, how to be good team leaders, how to communicate effectively, as you talked about, just effective communication, how to communicate effectively when presenting to the CEO or top management, etc. So Amrita, ma'am.
Yeah. So, oftentimes I tell my team that in technology, as you go higher in the ladder, because technology is changing so fast, you sort of become redundant. So the younger generation knows more than you do, quite opposite to being a doctor or being a person in finance or being a person in other of the domains, where the more the experience you get, the better you get. But in technology, unfortunately, because it moves so fast and it's evolving so fast, that you have to keep pace with it. So if you, in technology, as a domain expert, to keep yourself up to date is very, very important. And constantly skilling and reskilling yourself so that you can manage and lead a team is extremely important. That's one part of it. But on the other hand, because you're also dealing with non-domain areas, which means you're dealing with the business, you're dealing with the finance aspects, you're part of the management, you have to be able to convert these technical terms, etc., into simple words or understandable in business terms, so that the rest of your colleagues and rest of the management understand that. So you have to be able to balance the fact that you need to keep your skills as far as technology is concerned up to date, and you have to learn new skills in managing, in leadership, in being able to coach, and in being able to explain the solution in business terms. So that is how we have to balance the facts if you're if you're a leader in technology.
Nice. So Shivangi ma'am, I would like your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, I think skilling and reskilling is a way of life in the tech sector. So there's no shortcut, right? At the same time, you also, as you sort of progress, you start building a big picture view of things, where you at least can put, anything new that's coming in, you kind of figure out where it fits into that big picture. And so that helps you to know, while you may not have to sit and learn a new scripting or a coding language, you know what that is about and what that needs to, what it can deliver, right? And how do you then, as Amrita mentioned, marry it to what business needs? I feel the more you progress in your job, the ability to connect the dots becomes more and more important, right? So being able to pick stuff up. At the same time, I think we live in an era today where you cannot be a generalist, for definitely not in the tech sector, but I think in any sector. So you need to absolutely have a core domain skill, and then you build the rest of the stuff that helps you sort of manage, do the managerial aspect of it without letting go of the core skills. The moment you let go of a core domain skill, or you sort of become redundant because you haven't kept up, I think that's you're beginning to go down a slippery slope.
Great. I think so. I think reskilling is, I think, not just for women, but I think for everyone in the technology domain. I think it's a given. But on top of that, of course, you need to build on the leadership skills as well, and that is where people tend to get left behind. So I just want to take a break and request everyone, if you have any questions, do send in your questions in the chat box, which is there in front of you. And we will get those questions answered post our fireside chat. So any questions, fire them away. So, coming to an important aspect, one area where we generally see women lagging behind is pushing themselves to be more visible and vocal and networking. Shivangi, you mentioned that, about the networking aspect, you touched upon that. And how far do you agree with that? And what are your suggestions for them in terms of how can they be more vocal and use networking to their benefits? For instance, how can social media networking, especially LinkedIn and Twitter, play a role here? And Amrita ma'am, you mentioned that when you got into the entrepreneurial mode, your network helped a lot. So I think you will agree that this is a very important aspect. So how can women build on that?
Should I go first? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think networking, again, there is networking is not just about getting something from another person. It is also about you giving something, right, in return. And secondly, it's not something which is transactional. It's not as though you go to a conference and you give out visiting cards or exchange numbers, and lo behold, you have suddenly 50 people, and then you're that's not what networking is about, right? It is about contributing to somebody. You may meet one or two people, but you may meet maybe 15 people, of which maybe you may make a meaningful contribution, or give an idea or thought, or listen to somebody, and that helps you one by one, brick by brick, you build your skills, right? And so it is important that you shouldn't approach everything with a transactional thing, about saying what's in it for me. It's also a question of paying it forward. Somebody's been good to you, you need to pay it forward in society, right? And the other aspect is, of course, using tools like LinkedIn, for example, for sure. I tell the girls in my team often that, you go for a meeting, make sure you come back and connect with that person on LinkedIn, right? Because you may then post something meaningful. Just it's not just about going out there and saying I did this today, right? So do it consciously, but be very conscious of the fact that you're adding value in whatever you do, right? Otherwise it is meaningless, and then it is no different from saying, okay, let me go out and have a beer at the end of the day and be a part of an old boys club, which is not what it is about. That's important, but it's not as though that is what it is, right?
Yeah. Talking of networking, that reminds me that even, today we are not having any physical conferences and summits, but even when we do have our events, if you look at the proportion of women participating there in those events, it is highly outnumbered by men. So I think that kind of just gives some idea that, how very few women actually come and participate in some of these conferences as compared to the men. So Amrita ma'am, your take on this, on networking, how crucial is that? And especially now, because of the social distancing norms, and we are not going to see too many people going and meeting each other, how crucial is, social media like LinkedIn and Twitter to engage in the networking sessions?
So for me, networking means connecting. And it does not necessarily mean that, you have a coffee or you have a beer together, and that is what networking is all about. First and foremost, when you're doing work, you will have different points of views. You will have a fight with your colleagues, your team members, your vendors, your suppliers, and so on and so forth. but that doesn't mean that they become your enemies, or they become somebody you don't want to talk to outside of office, etc. So first and foremost, remembering that everybody that you come across or you are in contact with are your network. And how do you develop that relationship? And that relationship does not need to be your close friend. You may have a very close knit friend circle. That is very different from networking. So one needs to be able to differentiate that. And networking is about, as Shivangi said, that it's a two-way street. You connect with somebody and somebody else also connects back. Even just saying a hello or calling up, how are you? How are your children? How are the others doing? Itself is good enough. So physical presence is not required. Asking about them, connecting. Some of them, if you connect back after 2 years, 5 years, they should be willing to talk to you, should be willing to help you, and vice versa. Respond when people reach out to you on LinkedIn or reach out to you even on any medium. You need to respond. I have seen people who don't respond to emails, don't respond to phones, don't respond. So those are the aspects that count more than going and having a golf game on a Sunday or going and having a beer or a coffee as such. That is not what networking is about. It's about being able to connect back after many years and being able to talk about many things. If you don't have that sort of a relationship with the other person, then work or home, it doesn't really matter. They're not going to be coming forward and helping you, and vice versa. You may not be interested in any other parts of the world other than the small, pond that you are sitting in. So it's like that, in my opinion. So networking is what will, really work throughout your life, whether it's at home or at work.
Right.
We are human beings. We are human beings, and we are social beings. So the networking word does not in any way mean that you have to socialize with boys and you have to, go out for a golf. I've been a member of the golf course for many years, but I never played golf as such. But that doesn't mean that I don't have a good network.
Right. Very nice. So networking is all about give and take, kind of thing. So very nicely said. So changing gears a little, how would you guide the women who are new in the IT industry? I'm asking this because I feel when newcomers, think of IT, the first thought that comes to their mind is coding, programming, or software development. So I have two questions in this regard. First, how can one look beyond coding in IT, and what are the other areas in tech that one can tap into as a newbie? And second, because these are very, these are very interrelated questions. So next is knowing how to code really relevant to have a successful career in tech? So my question is both Amrita and Shivangi.
So, okay, if I go first, technology doesn't necessarily mean only coding. But when you do coding or when you start with coding, you understand the fundamentals of what technology is all about. Because when you're coding, you need to understand how the infrastructure is, how the network is, and the other, the OS layers are, and so on and so forth. So, and in today's world, coding is also about full stack. So in a way, it's good. The starting point to be a coding is not a bad thing. And in fact, it's a good thing. But subsequent to that, as you have to understand the other elements of the technology that make it work and that puts the solution in front of the business. So whether it's infrastructure or network, and it's evolving now as a service and new business models, those are aspects that you need to understand. If you look at my career, I started off with coding. Actually, I started off with operations research. Then 2.5 years later, I joined HCL, where I was doing coding and doing programming and building software, etc. I did that for about 10 years when I was Nestle, also implementing applications, implementing ERPs, etc. Those are other careers you can have in the applications domain. But subsequent to that, once you reach being a team leader in the application domain area, what next? You can become a CIO only when you have multi-domain experience, right? So you need to know the infrastructure, you need to know about security, you need to know about, governance and other things. So therefore, a lateral shift is very important to move upwards. So from there, I moved on to being the CIO for Comnet, or, that was an infrastructure company. I didn't even know what a VSAT meant. I didn't know what links meant, and so on and so forth. So understanding all the aspects of technology is important for you to grow in your career and to take up a management position. And that is most important, I would say.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, something that Amrita said, when you mentioned that about, having a good grounding in coding always helps, reminds me of, when I was graduating from IMC, and, one of the most prized jobs, if you were in marketing, was with Unilever. And Unilever, even today, I think, though I'm not very sure, has this thing of compulsory sales stint for the first 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's not as though all the folks who are going through it are going to remain sales reps throughout their life. But then if you don't have that grounding, you're never going to be able to build a business that sort of revolves around that. Similarly, it is like, if you do not know the basics, you're never going to be able to figure out what to do and how to leverage that. So it is important, but open your eyes. So as she said, there is that entire gamut of building up and becoming the CIO. Then there is the whole tech industry, which is on the product and the service provider side, right? Which is folks who are selling information technology or security based solutions, pre-sales, being able to go out and implement, roll out, setting up a channel network. All of that is another huge sort of career path, right, which is there, which a lot of people tend to stumble into it. It's not as though they kind of consciously choose that, right? So it's important that people know that all of this is there. I've met youngsters who say that no, I don't like coding, so I don't think I'm cut out for computer science or technology, missing the point that there is much more to it. So the industry is huge. There's so much you can do with it. You don't have to know how to manufacture soap to be able to, be a businessman who runs a soap business, right? It's like that.
Right, very rightly said. Very important point, Amrita, that you had brought up earlier was around career break. And what we have seen is that women usually find it difficult to join back in the mainstream after taking a career break. And even if they're hired after the break, sometimes they're not given enough exposure, especially considering the tech industry is very dynamic and the technologies are changing constantly. Any break in the career is perceived negatively. In case of women, because of the maternity leave or some other reasons, there are more chances of them going on a career break. So what is your thought on that and advice to women in the industry to, how can they bounce back effectively after a career break? Though you mentioned that there are organizations that have certain programs for women who are joining back after a career break, but are there certain hurdles that, that how they can overcome those hurdles and how they can bounce back effectively after a break?
See, I did mention that, companies are supporting this type of an initiative and would like to take back women or even men who have taken a break in their career. Now, it's a two-way street. They may be willing, but there are lots of things that you yourself need to do if you're taking a break. If you take a break, you need to be up to date in the domain that you're working in. And that is one of the reasons that coming back becomes a bigger challenge, because if you have not kept up to date and you have not seen the changes that are happening, the fear factor sets in. And once the fear factor sets in, you become quite, you struggle to bring back that momentum, and you struggle in many other areas of wanting to come back. So one is that you should be clear that you're taking a break, but you would want to pursue your career later on. Yeah. Unless you're clear about that, then it's like you're dragging your feet and you're not going to be able to, take that jump and do the things that are necessary to keep up to, up to date and to, you know, have that passion to join back. So I would say while companies are doing what they can, especially in technology, if you're on maternity leave or you've taken a break because, you know, you've gone abroad with your husband because his career is, you know, taken him abroad, try to do something that would keep you up to date, so that you can come back. You know, freelancing is an option nowadays. A lot of freelancing is happening. And so, you know, doing that from your home is not a big deal. You can do it in projects. You can do it in, you know, smaller chunks. So that self-motivation needs to be there. Then only you can make that comeback. It's true for anything. Even when you take a break in sports, you know, when the sports people have an injury, for them to come back, they have to do a lot of work before they're even reselected, or, you know, they can join back a team. So it's the same thing.
Yeah, very rightly said. Shivangi, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I want to also add another perspective, which is that especially when you're young, you have the next 30, 40 years ahead of you in your career, right? So it's a marathon, and a few years here and there are absolutely fine. It's not going to affect you in the long term. So I find a lot of people who take breaks are kind of beating themselves up about taking the break, right? So if you're taking a break to have a baby, enjoy that. Don't feel guilty. And don't feel that you're on the back foot because you've taken a break. Secondly, if you're coming back, be a little bit more open and flexible, because you don't know where opportunities will come up. Maybe the earlier role and the earlier job and the earlier profile of organization, you may not get the exact same profile, but that's fine. You know, maybe there's something else waiting for you which is equally good. Maybe for a while you may get a role which may not be as meaty as you've handled, but there's always learning. You know what, no matter what you do, you always learn. Even if you do a job you totally really do not like, there's still learning in that, right? So make use of that and think the longer term, right? Maybe so 3, 4, 5 years here and there makes absolutely no difference in the achievement of the longer term. There is no one straight path to success. Everybody charts their own journeys and their own paths, and success is also a very, defined very differently by different people. It's all in your mind. If you believe you're successful, you are successful. So just keep at it. Don't stop comparing with the outside world is one advice I always give people.
Great. I think fabulous, insights from both of you. A lot of facets which actually, not just apply to women, but also to men. So I hope there are men also on this session who are listening, and it will help them also. But of course, talking from the perspective of women, definitely, some of the things that you mentioned, whether it is, upskilling themselves, reskilling, being more confident, self-motivation, everything that you talked about, is going to be really helpful for all our audience who are listening to it. So meanwhile, we have received 2 questions, and let me ask the first question, and Bablu can ask the second question. So the first question that has come is that, which is for both you, Amrita and Shivangi. So they're saying that while the journey described by both of you was fabulous and enviable, but do women face resistance? And is there a systematic effort to pull them down when they move higher up? And how do women surpass this hurdle? Anyone can take it up first.
There is this thing called unconscious bias, right? Right, and organizations again are doing a lot of things to sort of educate people that there is an unconscious bias to whatever you do. I mean, there are aspects, and you box women in a certain way and their behaviors, etc. So you expect emotions which you may or may not be able to deal with. So yes, those aspects you have to face and you have to deal with it, and that's the reality of the world that we live in. But I would say that there's also recognition of the fact that these unconscious biases are there, and therefore people are doing their best to eliminate, to encourage women. So it's not black and white. There is a middle path, and people are trying to see how the balance can be created.
Yeah. And I do feel that while there, as Amrita said, there is conscious effort to go over it. I would also advise people to pick their battles. Sometimes I have seen not just women, men and women tend to go behind every single thing that upsets them. So and so said this to me, or so and so ignored me, and then you tend to let that fester. I feel you have to pick your battles. Pick the positive battles which are going to help you in the long term, and don't get dragged down by petty things. Again, you're not in a sprint, you're on a marathon. Think long term, right? And if you reach a point where you think there is no solution, obviously you fight for what is yours and what should rightfully be yours. But if you think something is not happening, then my advice is, please get out and start doing stuff which you enjoy. Life is not about wasting and getting more and more negative and staying in a place and a role which you don't enjoy. It's simply not worth it.
Wow, wonderful, ma'am. So I know we have touched upon this topic called imposter syndrome. So my question, that question we have received is, how can one identify whether somebody is suffering from it, and what are some of the common thoughts and feelings associated with imposter syndrome include? So Shivangi, you can take it.
Yeah, so imposter syndrome, I don't know how you would find it in another person, but you can, recognize it maybe in yourself, is when you feel you're at a particular position, people treat you in a particular way, they expect certain things out of you, and then you feel that, this is somebody else and this is not me, and I'm not actually as good as this. You should actually read up. There are some great lectures on imposter syndrome and how to deal with it online. And it's important to recognize it, because like with anything else, if you recognize that you're having a problem, then you'll deal with it. And there are different ways to deal with it. There's no one single rule that fits all. It's not that everybody suffers from an imposter syndrome, but many do. So it's important to recognize that.
Amrita, would you like to take?
Yeah, I think Shivangi has said it rightly, that people have to recognize the imposter syndromes themselves. And it's really difficult to identify that aspect in somebody else, because if that person is underconfident and thinks that he or she is not good enough, that is not necessarily visible properly, unless you're sort of coaching that person or mentoring that person. Only then in a private one-to-one will these conversations come up. But identifying that generally becomes quite difficult.
Great. I think so. We are actually at 6 o'clock, so 6 p.m. And we have had one wonderful hour of great discussion with both of you, Amrita and Shivangi. Thank you so much for your time. And as we're approaching the end, we have learned a lot from this discussion, and I truly hope that the discussion was equally worthwhile to all our listeners, to the audience. And I, on behalf of the entire DynamicCIO team, would like to really thank you, Shivangi and Amrita, for this meaningful contribution and valuable time, and for really taking our time to mentor and give valuable insights to other women in the technology industry. Before we wrap up, I just want both of you to kind of maybe just list down top 2 or 3 key takeaways that you want the women in the tech industry who are listening to this session go back with.
So from my perspective, I would say there are 3 aspects. One is self-awareness and, a path, chalked out for yourself. Put yourself first once in a while, not always the others. That's the first thing, because that then will lead to other good things as such. Second is, we talked a lot about the environment and creating an environment for oneself where you can pursue your passions and your drive for having a full-fledged career. And third, I would say is that, do not take the word networking lightly. To be able to make a good career, those are important aspects. And you never know when people who you are helping will, stand up and help you, or vice versa. So those are the three things I would say as a wrap up of this session.
And I mean, those are great points. I would like to add saying that, if you're ambitious, be ambitious and don't be on the back foot about being ambitious. I feel a lot of people are kind of, feel that they should excuse themselves for being ambitious, women. Right. Second, be flexible, be open. Remember that you don't know where you learn, what comes. Growth is not always horizontal or vertical. Growth is many times horizontal. Amrita mentioned it, right? And the third thing is, make sure you're learning all the time. So keep learning, keep skilling, keep learning from all kinds of channels, not just the formal channels. And enjoy the ride. I mean, enjoy the journey. If you're not having fun, then you're in the wrong place. Okay. So make sure you enjoy what you do. Very, very important.
Great. Thank you so much for those wonderful takeaways, and for all of those who are listening to us, who are watching this session. We have a feedback form which will come up. So do fill in that feedback form. We look forward to your feedback, how we can improve further, and what are some of the areas or discussion pointers that you would like for us to take up in our next session for the Women in Tech series. Do let us know on that. So thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you, Amrita and Shivangi, and have a great day to both of you. And thank you once again, and bye.
Thank you so much for being such wonderful hosts. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Amrita.
Thank you very much.
Shivangi,
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.